The sound was not a scream. It was worse. It was the sound of a scream trying and failing to exist. A strangled, wet rasp that tore through the hushed elegance of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, Aria. One moment, the girl was a portrait of fragile wealth, a porcelain doll in a velvet dress seated opposite her formidable father. The next, she had collapsed forward, her small hands clawing at her throat, her body convulsing in a silent, horrifying dance. Her mouth was a perfect O of terror, but no sound escaped, only that awful, tearing friction of air against paralyzed vocal cords. Her father, Alistair Finch, a man whose name could move markets and bend politicians, lunged from his chair. The raw animal panic in his voice shattered the restaurant's curated calm. "Lily! Lily, breathe!" Heads turned. Silverware froze mid-air. A champagne flute tumbled from a nerveless hand, shattering on the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. His daughter, Lily Finch, hadn't spoken a coherent word in 9 months. 21 of the world's leading specialists had probed and scanned and medicated her. 21 experts, with their 7-figure invoices and somber prognoses, had failed. They had spent millions to reclaim a voice that was now, it seemed, choking the very life from her. And across the room, by the service station, a waitress stood frozen, a polished silver coffee pot trembling in her hand. Her name was Ilara. She was 29, though the exhaustion in her eyes made her look older. She wore a starched black apron and served overpriced sea bass to pay the rent on a room the size of Alistair Finch's walk-in closet. But 7 years ago, she wasn't Ilara Vance, waitress. She was Ilara Croft, the most promising vocal prodigy Juilliard had seen in a generation. Her field wasn't performance. It was the intricate, delicate science of the human voice. She didn't just sing notes. She understood the physiology of their creation, the neurology of their expression, the way trauma could sever the link between mind and muscle. She rehabilitated voices others had declared lost forever, until the day they destroyed her, stripped her of her scholarships, erased her from the conservatory's records, and branded her a reckless charlatan. The man now screaming for help, his face a mask of terror as he cradled his dying daughter, was the patron of the very program that had cast her out. Alistair Finch's name was on the building where her career had been executed. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Every survival instinct, honed over 7 years of shame and obscurity, screamed at her to melt into the shadows, to remain invisible. If she intervened, if she used the knowledge they had forbidden her to practice, she could face legal action. The Finch family's lawyers were notoriously merciless, but Lily's lips were beginning to acquire a faint, bluish tint. The edges of her fingernails were turning dusky. Cyanosis. Brain damage was only minutes away. What Alistair Finch didn't know, as he watched his daughter suffocate in silence, was that the broken waitress watching from across the room was the only person on the planet who understood what was happening inside that small, terrified throat. And what Ilara didn't know was that this single moment was about to detonate a past she had buried under 7 years of grief and regret, unearthing secrets that would change everything. She took a step, then another. Her voice, when it came, was not the deferential murmur of a waitress. It was clear, calm, and resonant with an authority she hadn't used in years. It sliced through the panic like a surgeon's scalpel. "Get your hands off her throat! You're making it worse!" Everyone froze. Alistair Finch's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers. They were the eyes of a wolf, wild with grief and fury. For one terrible, suspended second, neither of them breathed. The billionaire and the waitress, bound by a history neither of them yet fully understood, staring at each other over the silent, dying girl who connected them both. 6 hours before Lily Finch's throat closed, Ilara's alarm blared at 4:30 a.m. She slapped it silent and lay in the pre-dawn gloom of her Chicago apartment, tracing the geography of a water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a map of a country she would never afford to visit. She didn't need to open her banking app to know the numbers that haunted her sleep. Balance, $270.48. Rent, due in 3 days, $150. Student loan debt from a degree she was never allowed to finish, a debt that followed her like a shadow, $182,000. The legal fees she still owed from the hearing, $47,500. The math was a cruel joke she was forced to live every day. By 5:45 a.m., she was on the L train, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels a metronome counting down the seconds of her life. The city was still waking up, smelling of damp pavement and exhaust fumes. She clutched a worn copy of The Structure of Singing by Richard Miller, its pages soft as cloth, the margins filled with her own frantic, brilliant annotations from another life. Aria was on the Magnificent Mile, a temple of glass and steel where the tasting menu cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She slipped in through the service entrance, the familiar smells of roasting garlic, fresh bread, and industrial-strength floor cleaner enveloping her. In the staff locker room, she changed into her uniform, the crisp fabric feeling like a costume. Tucked away in the bottom of her locker, wrapped in an old sweater, was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside lay a laryngeal mirror and a set of tuning forks, relics of a dead life. She touched the cold steel of the mirror for a moment, then shut the locker door with a decisive click. "Vance, you're on the Finch table tonight," said Marco, the maitre d', his face tight with anxiety. Section 3. You know the rules. No sudden movements, no unsolicited conversation. He likes his servers to be ghosts. "I know the drill," Ilara said, her voice flat. Every server knew about Alistair Finch and his silent daughter. They came in once a month, sat at the same corner table overlooking the city lights, and ate in a silence so profound it seemed to suck the sound from the air around them. Finch was a notoriously difficult customer, demanding, precise, and a terrible tipper unless the service was utterly flawless. The dinner rush began, a controlled chaos of clattering plates, murmured orders, and the soft strains of a live jazz trio. Ilara moved through it all with an economy of motion that was almost beautiful. She balanced trays, uncorked $1,000 bottles of wine, and anticipated needs before they were spoken. Her memory was photographic. She never wrote down an order, even for a table of 12. It was a skill honed not in restaurants, but in memorizing complex musical scores and anatomical charts. Sometimes, when the stress mounted, her left hand would twitch, her fingers unconsciously forming the shapes for laryngeal massage or tapping out a vocal scale against her thigh. Muscle memory was a ghost that haunted her body. At table 9, an elderly gentleman, Mr. Abernathy, a regular, was speaking to his wife. His voice was raspy, hoarse, a smoker's rasp, most would assume. But Ilara heard something else, a subtle tremor, a slight wet quality to his phonation. Vocal fold paresis, her brain supplied, unbidden. Possible recurrent laryngeal nerve weakness. "Mr. Abernathy," she said softly as she refilled his water glass. "Forgive me for overstepping, but that's a beautiful tie. Is the knot a bit tight? You sound a little strained." He looked down, confused. "Tight? No, I don't think so. It's just," she improvised, thinking fast. "My grandfather had a similar hoarseness. It turned out to be simple acid reflux. A few antacids cleared it right up. Probably nothing, but it might be worth mentioning to your doctor." He thanked her, a little puzzled. A month later, he would return and press $100 bill into her hand. His doctor, prompted by the Waitress's diagnosis, had found a small, benign polyp on his vocal cord. They caught it early. It was easily removed. He would never know that she had diagnosed him from 10 feet away, using nothing but her ears. Elara retreated to the kitchen, her hands shaking. She had done it again. Dangled her feet over the edge of the abyss, the chasm between who she was and who she was pretending to be. One day, it would get her caught. At precisely 8:00 p.m., the energy at the front of the restaurant shifted. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Ghost purred to the curb. The doorman sprang to attention. Alistair Finch emerged. He didn't just exit a car, he claimed the sidewalk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a bespoke suit of such dark, perfect navy, it seemed to absorb the light around it. His hair was thick and iron grey, his face a handsome, severe mask of controlled power, but his eyes, as he turned to help his daughter, were stark with a grief so deep it looked like a physical wound. Lily Finch followed. She was 14, with her father's sharp cheekbones and her mother's enormous dark eyes that held a universe of unspoken sorrow. She clutched a small, leather-bound journal to her chest like a shield. Marco greeted them with a practiced, deferential bow. "Mr. Finch, welcome back. Your table is ready." As they moved through the dining room, a wave of whispers followed them. "That's him. The daughter. Can you imagine? All that money and he can't fix her." Finch ignored it all, his hand a protective brand on Lily's shoulder, steering her through the gawking diners. Lily kept her eyes fixed on the floor. Elara approached their table, menus in hand, her professional smile a carefully constructed facade. "Good evening, Mr. Finch. Welcome to Aria." He gave her a cursory, dismissive glance. She was, as Marco had said, a ghost. Part of the furniture. But then, as a busboy hurried past, he stumbled, sending a tray of water glasses crashing to the floor. Shards of glass skittered across the marble. The young man went pale, stammering apologies. Marco started forward, his face thunderous, ready to fire him on the spot. "Leave him." Finch's voice was a low command. He turned to the terrified busboy. "It's all right. It was an accident. Are you cut?" He actually knelt, his $1,000 trousers brushing against the wet floor, to check the boy's hands. He then pulled a crisp bill from his wallet, a $500, and pressed it into the boy's hand. "For the trouble." Elara watched, stunned. The ruthless titan of industry, the cold, demanding customer, was showing a moment of profound, unexpected kindness to a clumsy busboy. The contradiction was jarring. When he returned to his table, the mask of command was back in place. He ordered for both of them without consulting Lily. "She'll have the pan-seared scallops, sauce on the side, and the risotto. I'll have the New York strip, medium rare." Lily wrote something in her journal and pushed it across the table. He read it, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a sad, fleeting smile. "Yes, Poppet. You can have the chocolate lava cake for dessert." Their interaction was a silent, well-rehearsed ballet of grief. He anticipated her needs. She communicated in script. He was trying to build a fortress of routine and predictability around a catastrophe he couldn't control. Lily wrote again. Finch's faint smile vanished. "I know. I miss her singing, too." The girl's eyes swam with tears she refused to let fall. Elara moved away, her own throat tight. She knew who her was. Eleanor Finch, Alistair's late wife, had been a world-renowned opera singer, a soprano whose voice, critics said, could break your heart and heal it in the same breath. She had died in a freak sailing accident 9 months ago. Lily had stopped speaking the day of the memorial service. Dinner progressed in near total silence until it didn't. Ilara was at the sommelier station when she heard it. That choked, rasping gasp. She turned. Lily Finch was on her feet, her chair knocked over. Her journal lay splayed on the floor. Both hands were clamped to her neck, her knuckles white. Her face was contorted in a mask of pure terror, her body starting to jerk in violent, uncontrolled spasms. It was a seizure of silence. "Lily!" Finch's roar was primal. He grabbed her, trying to pull her hands away. "What is it? Are you choking?" The restaurant exploded. People were standing, shouting, "Call 911! Is there a doctor?" Ilara moved. Her mind was a whirlwind of clinical observation, overriding the waitress's panic. Not choking. The hand position was wrong. She wasn't clutching the suprasternal notch where a food bolus would lodge. Her fingers were digging into the sides of her neck, pressing on the sternocleidomastoid muscles, trying to physically pry open an airway that was being closed from within. The convulsions weren't random. They had a rhythm. It was a paradoxical vocal fold motion event, a severe laryngeal spasm, likely triggered by a psychosomatic response. Her brain was telling her larynx to slam shut. Ilara's training screamed at her. She had seen this twice before, once in a war veteran with PTSD, once in a survivor of a violent assault. It was trauma made manifest, the body's most primitive self-defense mechanism turning on itself. Stepping forward meant exposure. It meant questions she couldn't answer. It meant facing the world of Alistair Finch, the world that had chewed her up and spat her out. If I help, they'll know. A waitress doesn't know what a paradoxical vocal fold motion is. They'll find out who I am. Finch will sue me for practicing without a license. But if I don't... Lily's lips were now a terrifying shade of blue. Her eyes, wide and pleading, were locked on her father's, filled with a horror no child should ever know. She was dying. Right there. Something in Ilara, a part of her she thought had died 7 years ago in a sterile boardroom, roared back to life. The healer, the scientist, the prodigy. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing became deep and even. 7 years of repressed knowledge, of thousands of hours of study, flooded her system. She moved across the floor, pushing through the circle of helpless onlookers. "Get your hands off her throat. You're making it worse." The command in her voice cut through the noise. Alistair Finch stared at her, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Who the hell are you?" "That doesn't matter right now," Ilara said, her voice dropping into a calm, therapeutic tone as she knelt beside Lily. "Sir, your panic is increasing hers. The muscles in her throat are constricting in response to fear. I need you to be calm. Step back." He was a man who had never been given an order in his adult life, but something in her absolute certainty made him comply. He took a half step back, his hands hovering uselessly. Ilara ignored him, her focus entirely on the terrified girl. "Lily," she said, her voice a low, soothing hum. "My name is Ilara. Look at my eyes. Just my eyes." Lily's frantic gaze found hers. "You are not choking on food. Your airway is clear. Your body is just scared. It's forgotten how to breathe. I'm going to help you remember. We're going to breathe together. I want you to feel the vibration in my voice. Listen." Ilara placed 2 fingers gently on Lily's larynx, a touch so light it was barely there, but precise. It was a diagnostic touch, feeling the tension in the thyrohyoid and cricothyroid muscles. Then she began to hum, a low, resonant G-sharp, a pure, supported tone that vibrated through her own chest. Feel that, Lily? That's a relaxed sound. Your throat can make that sound. I want you to try to hum with me. Don't try to speak. Just a little hum like a kitten purring. She kept humming, her eyes locked with Lily's, projecting an aura of absolute calm into the girl's storm of panic. Slowly, miraculously, a tiny thread-like vibration started in Lily's throat. It was barely audible, but it was there. "That's it," Ilara breathed, a real smile touching her lips. "That's perfect. You're telling your body it's safe. Keep going." The spasm began to ease. The violent convulsions softened into tremors. A hint of pink returned to Lily's lips. The rasping sound quieted. She took a shuddering, ragged breath. Then another. The paramedics burst through the door just as Lily slumped forward, exhausted and sobbing silently, into Ilara's arms. One of the paramedics, a man with tired eyes, took in the scene. "What happened here?" "We got a call about an anaphylactic shock." "It wasn't anaphylaxis," Ilara said, not looking up, still stroking Lily's hair. "It was an acute, paradoxical vocal fold motion event, a severe laryngospasm. Her vitals should be stabilizing now, but she'll need observation. Check her oxygen saturation." The paramedic stared at her. "A what? Who are you?" Ilara felt a cold dread wash over her. She'd said too much. The jargon had just spilled out. I took a first aid course once," she stammered, her voice losing its authority, becoming the waitress's murmur again. Alistair Finch was staring at her, his expression unreadable. The fury was gone, replaced by a piercing, analytical intensity. He looked from his daughter, now breathing raggedly in Ilara's embrace, to Ilara's face, as if seeing her for the very first time. "That wasn't a first aid course," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He pulled out a platinum business card. "I don't know who you are, but you're going to tell me. You saved my daughter's life when no one else knew what to do. Our business is not finished." He took Lily from her arms, his touch surprisingly gentle, and followed the paramedics out. Ilara was left kneeling in the center of the dining room, a ghost who had suddenly, terrifyingly, become solid. The business card felt as heavy as a block of lead in her trembling hand. On it, in stark engraved letters, were the words, "Alistair Finch, CEO, Finch Global Enterprises," and beneath it, a private cell number. Marco rushed over, his face ashen. "Ilara, my God, Mr. Finch's assistant just called. He wants your full name and contact information. He said he thinks you can help his daughter." The words landed like a prison sentence. The past she had run from for 7 years had just hunted her down in the one place she thought she was safe, and it was wearing a $10,000 suit. Sleep was a country Ilara couldn't find the visa for. At 3 a.m. she was at her laptop, the screen's glow casting long shadows across her tiny apartment. The name Lily Finch brought up a torrent of media coverage. Billionaire's heiress struck mute. Finch spends fortune on daughter's mysterious silence, the girl who lost her voice. She devoured the articles, her analytical mind filtering the journalistic melodrama for clinical facts. 21 specialists, neurologists from Mayo, ENTs from Johns Hopkins, psychiatrists from Stanford. She recognized some of the names. Dr. Madeline Croft, a renowned otolaryngologist, seemed to be leading the team. Ilara had read her papers at Juilliard. Croft was brilliant, but notoriously rigid, a physician who treated symptoms, not people. The diagnoses were all over the map: conversion disorder, functional aphonia, psychogenic mutism. Medical terms for "we don't know." Then she found it, buried in a long-form piece from an investigative journal, a leaked copy of a recent laryngoscopy report signed by Dr. Croft. Larynx appears structurally normal. Vocal folds show minor inflammation, consistent with muscular tension dysphonia. No organic pathology found. No organic pathology. Ilara zoomed in on the attached endoscopic image. To a normal eye, it was just a clinical photo of a human throat. But Ilara saw it differently. She wasn't just looking at the structure, she was seeing the posture. The way the arytenoid cartilages were pulled slightly too far forward, the subtle posterior chinking, the almost imperceptible tension in the ventricular folds. "You're all wrong," she whispered to the empty room. "You're looking for a broken instrument, but you're not listening to the musician. This isn't just grief. It's a learned pattern, a neuromuscular prison built by trauma. The inflammation wasn't the cause, it was the result of 9 months of the laryngeal muscles being held in a state of constant, low-grade tension, a physical manifestation of Lily's emotional state. Dr. Croft's proposed treatment was vocal rest and antipsychotic medication. It was like trying to fix a concert violinist's stage fright by taking away their violin and giving them a sedative. It was malpractice born of ignorance. Meanwhile, in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Alistair Finch was also awake. He had just received the report from his head of security, a man paid to unearth secrets. Subject, Ilara Vance, age 29, current employment, Aria Restaurant, no criminal record, no advanced degrees on file. Alistair frowned. It didn't add up. Addendum. The report continued. Subject filed for a legal name change 7 years ago. Previous name, Ilara Marielle Croft. Alistair's blood ran cold. Croft, not a common name. He typed a new command to his security chief. Cross-reference Ilara Croft with Juilliard Conservatory, Finch Endowment Programs. 15 minutes later, the file landed in his encrypted inbox. It felt like a bomb detonating in the silent room. Juilliard Conservatory, Finch Vocal Dynamics Program, formal disciplinary hearing. Date, 7 years, 3 months ago. He saw the photo. A younger Ilara, her hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, her expression a mixture of defiance and devastation. Accusation. Reckless endangerment. Development and application of an unapproved radical vocal technique resulting in significant vocal damage to fellow student Veronica Pace. Verdict. Expulsion. Permanent blacklisting from all affiliated institutions. Oversight Committee included a representative from the Finch Endowment. His own foundation. He had signed off on the committee's findings. He remembered it vaguely. A minor issue, a liability to be contained. He hadn't read the details, just the executive summary provided by his foundation's director. Radical. Dangerous. Clear-cut case. He had authorized them to handle it. He had ruined her. Based on a 1-page summary, he had rubber-stamped the destruction of her life. And last night, she had used that same dangerous knowledge to save his child. The hypocrisy was a physical blow. He felt a wave of nausea, a feeling so foreign he barely recognized it. He, Alistair Finch, had been catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. The next morning, his sister Amelia, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who was one of the few people not intimidated by him, found him staring out the window of Lily's private hospital room. "She's stable," he said, his voice hollow. "They're calling it an unexplained episode. Croft wants to increase her medication." "Alistair, that waitress knew what to do," Amelia said, studying his ravaged face. 21 of the most expensive doctors in the world, and a girl serving coffee saved her in 2 minutes. "Who is she?" "She's not a waitress," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. "She was a prodigy, the best vocal scientist of her generation, and I destroyed her." He told Amelia everything, the hearing, the file, his signature on the bottom line. Amelia's expression, usually sympathetic, hardened. My God, Alistair. What are you going to do? He looked at Lily, asleep in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white pillows. She looked so much like her mother. Eleanor would have been horrified. She would have seen the truth of Elara instantly. Eleanor had always trusted art and instinct over boardrooms and balance sheets. He had spent the last 9 months trying to manage his grief like a corporate acquisition, throwing money and power at it, refusing to face the messy, uncontrollable reality of his pain, because facing Lily's silence meant facing his own. I don't know, he admitted, his voice cracking. But she's the only one who saw the truth, and I'm the reason she's not allowed to help. Then you know what you have to do, Amelia said, her voice firm. You have to make this right, not just for Lily, for her. He nodded, a slow, heavy movement. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the number on the platinum business card. It was time to face Dr. Elara Croft and beg for help from the woman whose life he had single-handedly shattered. 2 days later, Elara was polishing wine glasses behind the bar at Aria when she felt the atmosphere in the room change. Alistair Finch stood in the doorway. He wasn't looking for a table. His eyes, intense and unnervingly focused, were locked on her. Marco started toward him. Mr. Finch. A pleasure. I'm here for her, Finch said, his voice cutting through the restaurant's buzz. He pointed a single imperious finger at Elara. We need to talk, privately. Now. The entire restaurant fell silent. Diners stared. The staff froze. Elara felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, stripping away her anonymous waitress disguise. I'm on my shift, she said, her voice shaking slightly but holding firm. Take your break, Finch commanded, not to her, but to Marco. She had no choice. She led him through the swinging kitchen doors, past the startled chefs and dishwashers, into the dry goods storeroom. The door clicked shut behind them, enclosing them in the scent of flour and bleach. He didn't waste time. Elara Croft. It wasn't a question. The sound of her real name, a name she hadn't heard spoken to her face in 7 years, was a physical shock. She flinched. That was my name, she said, lifting her chin, a spark of the old defiance in her eyes. The disciplinary hearing. Veronica Pace, the Finch Vocal Dynamics Program, he continued, listing the components of her ruin like a prosecutor. I've read the entire file. Then you know why you should stay away from me, she shot back, her voice laced with a bitterness she could no longer contain. According to your foundation, I'm a reckless danger to my subjects. Or did you forget the part you paid for? A muscle jumped in his jaw. The evidence. I was told it was irrefutable. The evidence was a lie. The words erupted from her, raw and painful. Veronica was jealous of my research. She pushed her own voice too far, against my explicit instructions. And then she and my mentor, Professor Albright, threw me to the wolves to cover it up and protect the program's reputation. Your program. I didn't know, he said, and for the first time she heard not power or arrogance in his voice, but a deep, hollow chasm of regret. You didn't want to know, she corrected him, her voice cold as ice. I was a rounding error in your philanthropic budget. You signed a paper, destroyed a life, and went to lunch. The silence in the small room was suffocating. He looked, for a moment, utterly broken. Please, he finally whispered, the word seeming alien on his lips. Help her. Help Lily. Dr. Croft is going to put her on a regimen of antipsychotics and has suggested experimental surgery on her larynx. Surgery. Elara felt sick. For what? There's nothing structurally wrong with her. That would be like performing open-heart surgery for a panic attack. It could destroy her voice forever. I know, he said, his desperation palpable. He held out a tablet. Her complete medical file, unrestricted access. Tell me what they're missing. Tell me what to do. Name your price. I will pay anything. This is a HIPAA violation, she said, but she was already taking the tablet. I own the hospital, he replied flatly. I'll waive it. For the next hour, surrounded by sacks of sugar and industrial-sized cans of tomatoes, Elara became Dr. Croft again. She scanned hundreds of pages of reports, her eyes flying across the screen, absorbing, analyzing, connecting dots no one else could see. They're all treating it as one of two things, she said finally, looking up, her eyes blazing with intellectual fire. Either it's purely psychological, conversion disorder, or purely physical, muscular tension. It's not. It's both. It's a psychoneuromuscular feedback loop. The trauma of her mother's death created the initial laryngeal tension, a subconscious guarding of the instrument that connected her so deeply to her mother. Now that physical tension has become a learned habit, a default state for the muscles. The fear of not being able to speak causes more tension, which makes it harder to speak. Dr. Croft is trying to treat the smoke without seeing the fire. She pointed to a line in a psychiatrist's report. Patient wrote in her journal, "If I talk, I will forget the sound of Mum's voice." This is the key, Elara said, her voice soft with dawning understanding. She's not just silent out of grief. She's silent out of a desperate, terrified desire to preserve a memory. Her silence is a sanctuary. Forcing her to speak with drugs or surgery will feel like a violation to her, a destruction of the last piece of her mother she has left. You don't need a surgeon. You need a translator. Someone who can teach her that her own voice is not a replacement for her mother's, but a continuation of it. Alistair stared at her, his face a canvas of awe and dawning hope. Come to the hospital. Consult. I'll create a position for you. Research fellow. Elara laughed, a short, bitter sound. And what happens when Dr. Croft or someone else runs my name? I'll be arrested for practicing medicine without a license. Your name won't protect me from that. Then I'll get you a license, he said, the old command returning to his voice. I will personally fund a review of your case. I'll hire the best lawyers. I will undo what I did. Why? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Why would you do all this for me? Alistair met her gaze, and the last of his armor fell away. She saw not the billionaire, but the grieving father. Because I was wrong, he said, his voice raw. I let my power make me lazy. I trusted the wrong people, and I broke an innocent person's life because it was convenient. I've spent 9 months trying to fix my daughter with money, but you fixed her in 2 minutes with knowledge and compassion. I won't let my past mistake cost my daughter her future. I will not compound one failure with another. She saw the truth of it in his eyes. This wasn't just about Lily. It was about his own redemption. Give me 24 hours, she said. I'll write a full diagnostic assessment and a proposed therapy protocol. You can give it to a competent doctor. I will guide you, but I will not step foot in that hospital. As he turned to leave, she called out, Mr. Finch, this doesn't fix what happened to me. I know, he said without turning around, but it's a start. Unseen, just outside the storeroom door, Marco, the maitre d', leaned against the wall, having heard every single word. He now looked at the closed door, not with fear of a powerful customer, but with the awe of a man who had just witnessed a reckoning. For the next 48 hours, Ilara didn't sleep. Fueled by coffee and a purpose she hadn't felt in years, she worked. She created a revolutionary therapy protocol, blending vocal science, neuromuscular retraining, and grief counseling. It was the culmination of the work they had tried to bury 7 years ago. She sent the encrypted file to Alistair, with a list of 3 open-minded specialists she knew by reputation. The pushback was immediate and brutal. "Mr. Finch," said Dr. Croft on a conference call Alistair insisted Ilara listen in on, her voice dripping with condescension. "I have reviewed this document. With all due respect, it reads like pseudoscience. It completely dismisses established therapeutic models. To base our treatment of a fragile young girl on the theories of a disgraced and unlicensed music student would be the height of medical irresponsibility." The other doctors fell in line behind her. Their egos, their reputations were intertwined with the established failing methods. They couldn't or wouldn't see a different path. Lily's condition, meanwhile, was getting worse. The internal tension was causing constant pain. She could barely swallow. Then the first blow fell. A certified letter arrived at Ilara's apartment. Official letterhead from the Illinois State Medical Board. Cease and desist notice. It has come to our attention that you, Ilara Croft, also known as Ilara Vance, have been engaging in unlicensed medical consultation. Failure to comply will result in immediate criminal prosecution. It was signed by a board director, but she knew who was behind it. Dr. Croft. She must have recognized the unique phrases from the protocol, put 2 and 2 together, and moved to eliminate the threat. The second blow fell the next morning, a call from the collections agency handling her student loans. "Ms. Vance, we see you've defaulted again. We are now moving to garnish your wages. Effective immediately, 25% of your paycheck will be seized." She hung up, the room spinning. She was trapped. The very act of trying to help was triggering the final collapse of her fragile life. She curled up on her threadbare sofa, the weight of it all crushing her. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was a fraud. A ghost who should have stayed in the shadows. For the first time in 7 years, she let herself cry. Not quiet, dignified tears, but gut-wrenching sobs of rage and despair for the life that had been stolen from her, for the girl she couldn't save. The crying jag lasted exactly 10 minutes. Then, something shifted. The grief burned away, leaving behind a hard, cold core of anger. They would not do this to her again. They would not silence another voice while she stood by and did nothing. She sat up, her face tear-stained, but her eyes clear. She picked up her phone and made a call she had been too ashamed to make for 7 years. To a woman named Clara, a paralegal who had been a friend at Juilliard, and one of the few who had believed her. "Clara, it's Ilara. I need your help. I need you to find every complaint ever filed against Professor Albright. And I need everything you can find on a former student named Veronica Pace." 24 hours later, the email arrived. It was a treasure trove of hushed-up scandals. 2 other students under Albright's mentorship had suffered vocal damage, their cases settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. And Veronica Pace, the celebrated mezzo-soprano, had cancelled 3 major European tours in the last 5 years, citing recurrent laryngitis. She's still struggling, Ilara realized. The damage she did to her own voice. It wasn't temporary. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about jealousy. Veronica and Albright had framed her to cover up the fact that their own reckless methods were the real danger. Her radical, gentle technique had been a threat to their aggressive, results-at-any-cost pedagogy. Armed with this new information, she called Alistair. "I'm coming to the hospital," she said, her voice devoid of fear. Dr. Croft has scheduled Lily for a diagnostic surgical procedure tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. She's going to operate on a healthy larynx to protect her own reputation. We are running out of time. "You can't," he said, his voice tight with panic. Croft got a restraining order. "She filed a complaint that you were stalking her patient. If you set foot on hospital property, they'll arrest you." The sheer, vicious audacity of it took her breath away. Croft wasn't just blocking her, she was trying to put her in jail. "Then meet me," she said, her mind racing. "The cafe across the street, in 1 hour, and bring your sister." The cafe was a generic, sterile place that smelled of burnt coffee. Alistair and Amelia arrived looking grim. Ilara didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid out the evidence on the small table: the cease and desist letter, the wage garnishment notice, the restraining order, and the damning information about Albright and Veronica Pace. "This is not just about helping Lily anymore," Ilara said, her voice low and intense. "This is a war. Dr. Croft is trying to destroy me to cover up her own failure. She is willing to perform an unnecessary, dangerous surgery on your daughter, Alistair, to prove a point." Amelia's face was pale with fury. "That monster! Alistair, you have to stop her. You're the chairman of the hospital board." "I've tried," he said, looking defeated. "I've tried to have her removed, but she's painted me as a desperate, grieving father being manipulated by a charismatic quack. She has the entire medical executive committee behind her. They see this as an attack on their professional integrity. If I fire her, they'll claim I'm acting emotionally, and they'll get a court order to take medical guardianship of Lily, arguing I'm unfit." It was a perfect trap. Ilara felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. They were out of legal moves. "Then we stop being legal," Ilara said, a dangerous light in her eyes. "Lily's surgery is at 7 a.m. Pre-op starts at 6 a.m. in the pediatric surgical wing. The night shift nursing staff changes at 5:45 a.m. There's a 15-minute window of chaos." Amelia stared at her. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Ilara said, looking directly at Alistair. "I am telling you that I am going into that hospital room. You can either help me, or you can watch them wheel your daughter into an operating room tomorrow morning. Your choice." Alistair looked at her, then at his sister. He saw the same steel resolve in Ilara's eyes that he saw in his own reflection every morning. The look of someone who would burn the world down for what they believed in. "The service entrance on the east side of the building is for catering," he said slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "The security guard there. His son is on a Finch scholarship at Northwestern. He owes me. Amelia, you'll create a diversion at the main nurses' station on the pediatric floor at 5:50 a.m. A problem with the billing. Make it loud. I'll get Ilara to Lily's room." It was insane. A billionaire planning a heist in his own hospital. "There's one more thing," Ilara said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, digital audio recorder. "When I'm in there with Lily, I need you to get this to Professor Albright at Juilliard. Tell him it's a recording of my session with Lily. Tell him if he doesn't call Dr. Croft and confess what he did 7 years ago, this recording, along with the evidence of his other silenced students, goes to the New York Times by noon." It was blackmail, it was ugly, and it was their only chance. At 5:45 a.m., the back corridors of the hospital were a labyrinth of shadows and echoing footsteps. Dressed in a set of borrowed blue scrubs, a surgical mask covering the lower half of her face, Ilara felt her heart pound in time with her quick, silent steps. Alistair led the way, his usual commanding presence replaced by a furtive, nervous energy. He swiped a keycard, and they slipped into the pediatric surgical wing. It was eerily quiet. "Room 612, he whispered, pointing down the hall. "Amelia starts in 2 minutes." They reached the door. He placed his hand on the handle, then hesitated, turning to her. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," she said with a confidence she didn't feel. He pushed the door open. Lily was awake, sitting up in bed, her face a pale, tear-streaked mask of fear. A nurse was checking her IV line. "I'll take it from here," Alistair said, his voice regaining its familiar authority. The nurse, startled by his sudden appearance, nodded and scurried out. The door clicked shut. It was just the three of them. "Lily," Ilara said softly, pulling down her mask. The girl's eyes widened in recognition. "The waitress." "I know you're scared," Ilara began, moving to the bedside. "And I know why. They want to operate on your throat, and you're afraid they'll take the last part of your mum away from you forever." Lily began to tremble, her eyes flooding with fresh tears. She nodded frantically. Just then, a commotion erupted from down the hall. A woman's voice, Amelia's, raised in anger. "What do you mean you can't find the pre-authorization? This is a $30,000 charge." The diversion had started. "Lily, I'm not going to let them do that," Ilara said, her voice a low, urgent hum. "But you have to help me. Your mother's voice isn't something that can be cut out. It's not in your throat. It's in you. It's in your memory, your heart, your DNA. Her voice was a gift, and she gave it to you." She took out her phone and pressed play. The sound that filled the room was breathtaking. It was Eleanor Finch, singing a simple, haunting lullaby, recorded years ago on a home video. The voice was pure, warm, and full of love. Lily let out a choked sob, her whole body shaking. "That's her gift, Lily," Ilara whispered. "Now, I'm going to teach you how to find your own. It's not about making a loud sound. It's about making a safe one." She placed her fingertips gently on Lily's throat. "I want you to listen to your mom's voice, and I want you to just hum. The tiniest, quietest hum you can imagine. We're not trying to speak. We're just trying to let the sound vibrate. We're going to let your voice and your mother's voice sing together." Lily squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face. She listened to the recording, her mother's voice wrapping around her. She took a shaky breath. And then, it happened. A sound. It wasn't a word. It was a note, a fragile, trembling, but perfectly pitched F-sharp. It was so quiet Ilara could feel it more than hear it, a tiny vibration under her fingertips. "That's it," Ilara breathed, her own eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Lily, that's it. It's still there. It's beautiful." The door flew open. Dr. Madeline Croft stood there, her face a mask of incandescent rage, flanked by 2 hospital security guards. "What is the meaning of this? I knew it. You violated a restraining order. Arrest her." The guards moved forward. Alistair stepped between them and Ilara. "You will not touch her. She is a dangerous, unlicensed charlatan who is traumatizing my patient," Croft shrieked. "Lily, honey, did this woman hurt you?" Everyone turned to the bed. Lily looked at Dr. Croft, the doctor who had prodded her and medicated her and dismissed her. She looked at her father, his face a mixture of fear and ferocious pride. She looked at Ilara, whose eyes were shining with belief in her. She opened her mouth. She took a breath. And she spoke her first word in 9 months. "No." The word was a whisper. It was hoarse, fragile, and cracked with disuse. But it was clear. It was definite. It was a sound that shook the foundations of the room. Dr. Croft froze, her mouth agape. The security guards stopped in their tracks. Alistair Finch let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Just then, Dr. Croft's phone began to ring, a shrill, insistent sound in the stunned silence. She glanced at the screen. Professor Albright. Her face went white. She answered it, her hand shaking. Professor, yes, I see. No, I understand, of course. She hung up. She looked at Elara, her expression of arrogant fury collapsing into the slack-jawed shock of total defeat. Albright had confessed. It was over. Cancel the surgery, Alistair said, his voice like iron. You're fired. And if your face is anywhere on this hospital's campus in 1 hour, I will personally see to it that the story of your gross negligence and malpractice is on the front page of every paper in this country. Now get out. Dr. Croft, utterly broken, turned and fled, the security guards trailing behind her in confused silence. Elara sank into the chair by Lily's bed, the adrenaline leaving her so quickly her legs gave out. Lily reached out a small, trembling hand and placed it on Elara's arm. Then she spoke again, her voice a tiny, rusty miracle. Thank you. The aftermath was not a tidal wave of triumph, but a slow, deliberate reconstruction. There was no instant, perfect ending. Healing, Elara knew, was a process, not a destination. Alistair Finch was true to his word. He unleashed a legal team that was less a group of lawyers and more a force of nature. The restraining order against Elara was dropped within hours. A formal investigation was launched into Dr. Croft, whose career imploded in a spectacular fashion. Professor Albright was forced into a quiet, disgraced retirement by Juilliard, and the conservatory, faced with a lawsuit from Finch that threatened their very endowment, issued a public, unequivocal apology to Elara Croft. They offered her full reinstatement and a position to head a new, well-funded research department dedicated to her methods. She turned it down. That part of my life is over, she told Alistair one afternoon, weeks later, in the sunlit music room of his penthouse. They didn't believe me when it mattered. I can't go back there. Instead, with a quiet, multi-million-dollar grant from the newly formed Eleanor Finch Foundation for Vocal Wellness, she opened her own private practice in a modest but elegant brownstone downtown. She didn't want a department. She wanted a sanctuary, a place for people whose voices had been lost, to trauma, to illness, to fear, to find them again. Her financial troubles vanished overnight, replaced by a sense of purpose so profound it was almost overwhelming. The wage garnishment notice and the cease and desist letter were framed and hung in her private office, not as trophies but as reminders. Lily's recovery was gradual. Her voice returned day by day, session by session with Elara. They were not just vocal lessons. They were lessons in breathing, in grieving, in remembering. They talked about Eleanor, not as a saintly, silent memory, but as a vibrant, laughing, flawed woman. Lily learned that her own voice, a warm and blossoming mezzo-soprano, was not a betrayal of her mother's memory, but its most beautiful legacy. Alistair changed, too. The ruthless, armored billionaire began to dismantle his own fortress. He started attending Lily's sessions with Elara, not as a benefactor, but as a participant. He learned to talk about his wife, to share his own grief. He learned to listen. He sold the Rolls-Royce and started taking the L train some mornings, just to remember what the city felt like from the ground. 6 months after the night at Aria, Elara stood in the wings of a small, private recital hall at the Chicago Symphony Center. On stage, bathed in a single, soft spotlight, Lily Finch sat at a grand piano. "This was my mother's favorite," she said, her voice clear and steady, holding just a hint of a tremor that was not from weakness, but from emotion. She used to sing it to me before I went to sleep. She began to play, and then she began to sing. The lullaby. Her voice wasn't her mother's, it was her own. It was rich and true, and filled with a wisdom far beyond her 15 years. It was the sound of a girl who had journeyed through silence and had come back with something beautiful to say. In the front row, Alistair Finch wept, not with the jagged pain of grief, but with the quiet, cleansing tears of gratitude and love. He caught Ilara's eye from across the room and gave her a small, solemn nod. It wasn't a thank you from a billionaire to a service provider. It was a gesture of profound respect between two survivors, two people who had found their way back from the brink. Ilara smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. She was no longer a ghost. She was not Dr. Croft, the disgraced prodigy, nor was she Ilara Vance, the invisible waitress. She was, finally and completely, herself. A woman with healing hands and a voice that, in its own quiet way, was just as powerful as the ones she fought so hard to save.